Most people destroy their lives for the same reason. Not because they are weak. Not because they lack talent. But because they obey feelings they never questioned. And if that sentence made you uncomfortable, stay with me. Because one of the 3 Stoic rules in this video is probably the exact rule you have been avoiding for years. You wake up tired. You promise yourself today will be different. You tell yourself you'll start the workout, make the call, fix the relationship, build the discipline, yet somehow the day slips away. Again. Not because you forgot, not because you couldn't, because another force quietly took control. A force so familiar that you mistake it for yourself. And that is where the problem begins. The Stoics understood something modern people desperately try to avoid. You are not destroyed by what happens to you. You are destroyed by what you permit inside you. Every collapse begins long before the visible collapse. The failed body begins with tolerated comfort. The broken heart begins with tolerated weakness. The scattered mind begins with tolerated distraction. Nothing arrives suddenly. Everything announces itself first. The tragedy is that most people ignore the warning signs because the warning signs feel good. Comfort feels good. Escapism feels good. Excuses feel good. Self-pity feels good. Until the bill arrives. And the bill always arrives. Years later. When your body no longer obeys you. When your confidence feels artificial. When your relationships feel hollow. When your dreams begin to look like old memories instead of future possibilities. That is why the Stoics were feared. Not because they could predict the future. Because they could see consequences before everyone else. They understood that every action contains a seed. Every thought contains a direction. Every habit contains a destination. The average person waits for disaster before changing. The Stoic changes before disaster becomes visible. And that brings us to the first brutal rule. A rule capable of rebuilding your body from the ground up. But before we get there, you need to understand something about yourself that almost nobody will tell you. You have spent years negotiating with your own weakness. You call it being realistic. You call it balance. You call it self-care. But if you examine your life honestly, many of those negotiations have produced nothing except stagnation. Every time you told yourself, tomorrow. Every time you lowered your standard. Every time you accepted less effort than you were capable of giving. You were training something, not discipline. Weakness. People think weakness arrives through failure. It doesn't. Weakness arrives through repetition. The repeated decision to choose comfort over growth. The repeated decision to avoid discomfort. The repeated decision to protect your current identity instead of expanding it. And after enough repetitions, the mind begins defending the very prison it lives inside. Think about that carefully. The prison becomes familiar. The prison becomes comfortable. The prison becomes home. That is why change feels threatening. Not because growth is dangerous. Because growth threatens the identity you have become attached to. The Stoics knew this. That is why they practiced voluntary hardship. Not because suffering was noble. Because comfort was dangerous. A person who can only function when conditions are perfect is fragile. A person who can act despite discomfort becomes powerful. Now imagine 2 men. The first waits until he feels motivated. The second acts regardless of motivation. One builds a prison. The other builds freedom. The difference appears small at first. Days pass. Weeks pass. Months pass. Then years. One becomes stronger. One becomes softer. One gains control. One loses it. And neither outcome happened by accident. This is where rule number 1 enters. Rule number 1. Stop trusting your feelings. That sounds harsh. Because modern culture worships feelings. It tells you to follow them. Express them. Obey them. Build your life around them. But Marcus Aurelius understood something most people never learn. Feelings are information, not commands. Read that again. Feelings are information, not commands. You can feel fear without obeying fear. You can feel laziness without obeying laziness. You can feel anger without obeying anger. You can feel sadness without surrendering to sadness. The moment you understand this, your entire life changes. Because most people believe they are their emotions. The Stoic understands emotions are visitors. Temporary, passing, unstable. Imagine building a house on moving sand. That is what happens when your decisions depend on emotions. Today you feel confident. Tomorrow you feel uncertain. Next week you feel inspired. Then exhausted. If emotions become your compass, your direction changes every day. No wonder so many people feel lost. The Stoic chooses something stronger. Principles, standards, duty, action. The body becomes powerful when action is disconnected from emotion. The mind becomes powerful when focus is disconnected from emotion. The heart becomes powerful when values are disconnected from emotion. And suddenly life changes. Not dramatically, quietly. The most dangerous transformations are always quiet. You begin showing up when you don't feel like it. You begin training when motivation disappears. You begin keeping promises nobody else sees. You begin becoming someone your former self would not recognize. That is how rebuilding starts. Not with inspiration, with obedience to standards. There is a reason so many people spend years consuming motivational content while remaining unchanged. They are addicted to feeling motivated. The Stoic seeks something different. Reliability. Anyone can act when they feel strong. The question is what happens when strength disappears. Anyone can be disciplined on a good day. The question is what happens on a bad day. Because your future is not determined by your best moments. It is determined by your average moments. The ordinary days, the boring days, the difficult days, those are the days that reveal who you really are. And if this message is exposing something uncomfortable inside you, that is good. Discomfort often signals truth. In fact, pause for a moment. If you are committed to becoming harder to break, like this video. Comment the phrase, "I obey standards." Then share this video with someone who keeps waiting for motivation before taking action. And if you want more lessons that challenge weakness instead of comforting it, subscribe now. Not because a channel needs subscribers. Because your future identity needs reminders. Now let's continue. The first rule rebuilds the body. But rebuilding the body is only the beginning. Many people become physically strong while remaining mentally fragile. Many people develop impressive habits while remaining emotionally dependent. Many people appear disciplined from a distance while secretly being controlled by validation. And this leads directly into the second brutal rule. A rule most people will resist. Because it attacks one of the deepest addictions in human nature. The addiction to approval. You may think you want success. You may think you want confidence. You may think you want freedom. But what if the thing preventing all three is the same hidden dependency? What if the real prison isn't failure? What if the real prison is needing other people to approve of you? That is where we continue. And the deeper we go, the more uncomfortable this becomes. Because the second rule is not about what others think of you. It is about why you care so much in the first place. The second rule begins where most people's freedom ends. Not in failure, not in weakness, in dependence. The dependence on being understood, praised, accepted, validated. Most people never notice how much of their life is controlled by invisible audiences. They enter a room and immediately begin adjusting. Adjusting their opinions, adjusting their behavior, adjusting their ambitions, adjusting their personality, not because they are dishonest. Because they are afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of judgment, afraid of standing alone, and that fear quietly shapes their entire existence. A man wants to start a business, but he imagines what people will say. A woman wants to leave a toxic relationship, but she imagines what people will think. Someone wants to change their life, but they fear becoming unfamiliar to those around them. So they stay, not because staying is right, because staying feels safer. The Stoics recognized this trap thousands of years ago. They understood that approval is one of the most expensive addictions a human being can develop. Because unlike food, money, or possessions, approval can never fully satisfy you. There is always another person to impress, another critic to silence, another audience to win over, another stranger whose opinion suddenly feels important. And so the chase continues. Year after year, life becomes performance. Identity becomes negotiation. Truth becomes optional. You begin asking questions that destroy strength. Will they like this? What will people think? What if they disagree? What if they laugh? The Stoic asks a different question. Is it true? That single shift changes everything. Because truth does not require applause. Truth does not require permission. Truth does not become false because people dislike it. Think about how much energy disappears from your life every day because you are managing perceptions. You replay conversations. You imagine criticisms. You rehearse explanations. You defend decisions nobody asked you to defend. Entire mental battles occur inside your head while reality remains unchanged. The mind becomes exhausted, not from action, from imagination. This is why so many people feel mentally drained despite accomplishing very little. Their energy is being consumed by invisible audiences. The Stoics called this slavery. Not because chains existed, because dependence existed, and dependence always creates chains. The moment your peace depends on another person's approval, they gain power over you. The moment your confidence depends on praise, you become vulnerable to silence. The moment your identity depends on acceptance, rejection becomes devastating. Now consider the life of a person who breaks this dependency. They still listen. They still learn. They still respect others. But they no longer surrender authority. Their center remains internal. Criticism arrives. They examine it. Useful. Keep it. Useless. Discard it. Praise arrives. They appreciate it. But they do not become addicted to it. Because they know praise and criticism often come from the same people. The crowd that celebrates you today may condemn you tomorrow. If your identity rises and falls with public opinion, stability becomes impossible. This is why so many people become trapped in emotional chaos. One compliment creates confidence. One insult destroys it. One successful day creates optimism. One setback creates despair. Their inner world becomes controlled by external events. The Stoic refuses this arrangement. And that brings us to rule number 2. Detach from approval, not because people are unimportant. Because your purpose is more important. This is where many misunderstand Stoicism. They imagine emotional coldness, indifference, isolation. But true Stoicism is not emotional numbness. It is emotional independence. You can love people without being controlled by them. You can respect people without needing their permission. You can care deeply without surrendering your peace. That distinction changes everything. Imagine standing before a mirror. Not the mirror on your wall. The mirror of your life. And imagine every major decision reflected back at you. How many were genuinely yours? How many were influenced by fear of judgment? How many dreams were abandoned because someone else doubted them? How many opportunities were ignored because they looked strange? How many talents remained hidden because they attracted attention? The answer is uncomfortable. For most people, far too many. Human beings often carry invisible crowds into every decision. Parents, friends, co-workers, former partners, people they haven't spoken to in years. Yet those voices continue directing behavior. The Stoic recognizes something brutal. Many of those voices will not attend your funeral. Yet you allowed them to direct your life. That realization alone can wake a person up. Because time is limited. Far more limited than most people realize. Every year disappears faster than the last. Every season passes. Every opportunity closes. And eventually there comes a moment when a person realizes they spent decades living according to expectations they never chose. That realization hurts, but it can also liberate. Because awareness creates choice. The moment you see the prison, escape becomes possible. And here's the paradox. The less you need approval, the more respect you often earn. Why? Because people trust certainty, not arrogance. Certainty. The quiet confidence of someone who acts according to principles. The calm presence of someone who is not constantly seeking validation. The grounded strength of someone whose identity is internally built. These individuals stand out, not because they demand attention. Because they no longer chase it. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire. Yet he constantly reminded himself not to become dependent on praise. Imagine that. A man with enormous power still guarded himself against validation. Why? Because he understood a truth most people discover too late. The hunger for approval grows when you feed it, not when you starve it. Every act of courage weakens the addiction. Every honest decision weakens the addiction. Every moment you choose truth over acceptance weakens the addiction. And eventually something remarkable happens. The fear begins shrinking, not all at once, gradually. The opinions that once controlled you lose their grip. The judgments that once haunted you lose their power. The imagined audiences become quieter. And for the first time in years, perhaps decades, you begin hearing your own voice again. That voice matters. Because beneath all the noise, it has been waiting. Waiting beneath expectations. Waiting beneath fear. Waiting beneath performance. Waiting beneath approval. And when you finally hear it clearly, something changes. Your body carries itself differently. Your mind thinks differently. Your decisions become cleaner. Your energy stops leaking into unnecessary battles. You become harder to manipulate, harder to intimidate, harder to control, not because you became aggressive, because you became anchored. Yet even this is not the deepest rule. The first rule rebuilds the body. The second rule rebuilds the mind. But there is still the heart. And the third rule is the most brutal of all, because it forces you to confront something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Loss. Not just the loss of people. The loss of certainty. The loss of comfort. The loss of illusions. The loss of the version of life you thought you were guaranteed. Most people spend years pretending loss is optional. The Stoic knows better. The Stoic prepares, not out of pessimism, out of clarity. And when we reach the third rule, you will understand why some people collapse under hardship while others emerge stronger than before. Because the difference has almost nothing to do with circumstances, and everything to do with what they practiced long before the hardship arrived. There is a moment that arrives in every life. A moment nobody can avoid. A moment no amount of intelligence, money, status, strength, or preparation can completely prevent. Loss. Something leaves. Someone leaves. A chapter closes. A certainty disappears. And suddenly the world you believed was permanent reveals what it always was. Temporary. Most people spend their lives trying not to think about this. They distract themselves. They deny it. They postpone it. They convince themselves there will always be more time. More opportunities, more chances, more tomorrows. Then reality interrupts the story. A phone call, a diagnosis, a betrayal, a failure, a goodbye, and everything changes. The Stoics understood something that sounds dark at first but becomes liberating once fully understood. Everything you love is borrowed. Read that carefully. Everything you love is borrowed. Your youth, your health, your relationships, your possessions, your reputation, your opportunities, even your own life. None of it belongs to you permanently. It has merely been entrusted to you for a period of time. Most people resist this truth. The Stoic embraces it, because resistance creates suffering, acceptance creates strength. And this brings us to rule number 3. Practice loss before loss arrives. At first, this sounds impossible. How can you practice losing something you still have? The answer changes everything. You stop assuming permanence. You stop acting as though tomorrow is guaranteed. You stop treating people as if they will always be there. You stop delaying important conversations. You stop postponing meaningful action. You stop living like time is unlimited. Because time is the one resource that never negotiates. Every second spent is gone forever. No exceptions. No refunds. No extensions. This realization does not make life depressing. It makes life valuable. Imagine two people standing beside the ocean. One believes he has endless days remaining. The other knows his time is limited. Who appreciates the sunset more deeply? Who notices the details? Who becomes more present? Usually the person who understands limitation. Scarcity creates value. The Stoics applied this principle to life itself. They would regularly remind themselves that loss was inevitable. Not because they wanted sadness. Because they wanted perspective. Perspective changes behavior. When you remember that life is temporary, trivial arguments lose importance. Petty grudges lose power. Meaningless distractions lose their attraction. Suddenly your priorities become clearer. And clarity creates peace. Think about how much emotional pain comes from expectations. You expected someone to stay. You expected life to be fair. You expected success to arrive faster. You expected people to understand you. Reality violated those expectations. Pain followed. The Stoic does not eliminate pain. The Stoic eliminates unnecessary surprise. That difference matters. Because when hardship arrives, preparation changes everything. Two people experience the same setback. One collapses. The other adapts. The circumstances may be identical. The mindset is not. One believed comfort was guaranteed. The other knew challenges were inevitable. One built expectations. The other built resilience. And resilience is what rebuilds the heart. Not avoidance. Not denial. Not wishful thinking. Resilience. This is why the Stoics were able to remain calm in situations that broke other people. They trained themselves to face reality before reality forced itself upon them. Most people only think about impermanence after loss occurs. The Stoic thinks about it beforehand. As a result, gratitude becomes deeper. Presence becomes stronger. Attachment becomes healthier. Love becomes more genuine. Because when you know something is temporary, you stop taking it for granted. You begin seeing things differently. The meal shared with family. The conversation with a friend. The ordinary morning. The quiet evening. The healthy body. The functioning mind. Things that once felt insignificant begin revealing their value. And value creates gratitude. Not the shallow gratitude people post online. Real gratitude. The kind that changes behavior. The kind that makes you pay attention. The kind that transforms ordinary moments into meaningful ones. Now consider your own life. How much are you delaying? How many goals remain untouched? How many words remain unsaid? How many opportunities remain unexplored? How many promises remain unfulfilled? Most people assume they have time. That assumption is dangerous, because the future is a possibility, not a guarantee. The Stoics understood this. That is why they acted. They did not wait for perfect circumstances. They did not wait for certainty. They did not wait for permission. They acted while they could. And that is the lesson hidden beneath all three rules. The first rule teaches you to stop trusting feelings. The second teaches you to stop depending on approval. The third teaches you to stop assuming permanence. Together they create something rare. A person who cannot easily be controlled. A person who cannot easily be manipulated. A person who cannot easily be broken. Because most people are controlled through emotion. You control yourself. Most people are controlled through validation. You stand on principles. Most people are controlled through attachment to certainty. You accept reality. That combination creates power. Not loud power. Not performative power. Quiet power. The kind that survives difficult seasons. The kind that remains when circumstances change. The kind that continues moving forward while others wait. The body becomes stronger because action replaces emotion. The mind becomes stronger because truth replaces approval. The heart becomes stronger because acceptance replaces fear. And slowly, almost invisibly, transformation begins. Not the transformation social media promises. Not overnight success. Not instant confidence. Something far more valuable. Stability. The ability to remain grounded when life becomes chaotic. The ability to continue when motivation disappears. The ability to endure when outcomes remain uncertain. The ability to stay aligned with your values even when nobody is watching. That is real strength. That is real discipline. That is real freedom. And freedom is ultimately what the Stoics were seeking. Not freedom from hardship. Freedom from slavery to impulses. Freedom from slavery to opinions. Freedom from slavery to fear. The world will always contain uncertainty. People will continue judging. Challenges will continue arriving. Loss will continue occurring. None of that changes. What changes is you. The person who faces it. The person who responds to it. The person who either grows stronger or remains unchanged. That decision belongs to you. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. Because every day you delay becomes part of your identity. Every action becomes evidence. Every choice becomes a vote. The question is simple. What are you voting for? Weakness or strength? Comfort or growth? Dependence or freedom? The answer is already visible in your daily actions. Not your intentions. Not your wishes. Your actions. So before you leave, ask yourself one final question. If someone observed your habits for the next 30 days, would they conclude you are building the life you claim to want? Answer honestly. Because honesty is where transformation begins. If this message resonated with you, like the video and subscribe. Comment the phrase, "I choose discipline over comfort." Not for me, for yourself, as a declaration of the person you intend to become. Then share this video with someone who needs a reminder that strength is built long before it is required. And when this video ends, do not return to distraction. Continue to the next lesson. Keep building, keep refining, keep removing weakness wherever you find it. The future version of you is watching every decision you make today. Make choices worthy of that person. Do not break the chain.